building in Illinois, you can't start in China, so you're not going to export that job. So a lot of lower wage jobs remain in this system, but the growth in the jobs, far and away, is among those that require post-secondary education and training, and that's certainly where the wages are, the higher wages. When we project, although it's basically we're projecting from a hole looking out, for the next decade or so, our projections show that we'll get sometime over between say 2008 and 18, our projections show we'll produce about 47 million job openings. That's new jobs. That is where an industry actually adds jobs that it didn't have before, but a lot of those, maybe more than half of them, are jobs that come from people retiring, and the rate of job growth from retirement or job openings from retirement is pretty high and will be for quite some time because of the movement of the baby boom through the retirement years. We've got very large increases in baby boom working, that is, people are staying in the labor market longer than they used to. Nonetheless, time takes its toll. And even with very high participation rates by baby boomers, we've got huge numbers of job openings. More than half of that 47 billion come from baby boom retirement. So if you work in manufacturing, while we don't think on net there'll be much growth in manufacturing, in fact, I think it's fair to say there'll probably continue to be an overall decline. There's going to be a lot of job openings, largely because of retirement and because of the parts of the manufacturing industry that are in fact growing. So the future, in a sense, is one in which when we climb out of this recession, and one hopes we've started doing that over the next several years we'll see growth again, and first in the industries that were hit hardest, and that's manufacturing and construction. And then in the other industries, notably healthcare, which is the big growth industry, but also education and a variety of other industries, including information industries and a whole series of others where the prospects are really pretty good. The problem we face is that most of the jobs that are coming, basically about 30 million of that 47 million job openings will require some post-secondary education or training. We know that there'll be job openings of roughly 5 to 6 million for people with master's degrees, professional degrees, PhDs, graduate degrees, and that will have maybe 14 million jobs for people with BAs, job openings. A slightly larger number for people with AAs or some college or a certificate, and then we'll have certificates and certification get to be tricky. That is, those are a fairly substantial share, more and more, in the labor market. They're kind of the new kids on the block. They're total now across the economy, we're looking at maybe 14, 15 million certificates. So there's the question is, how will we then make the education and training accessible for people who are trying to move into those jobs and trying to move out of the lower wage, lower skilled jobs, and that's the great challenge. That, in summary, I guess, is my sense of where we are and where we're going. I don't want to run too long with this. If we could start now, if you want to ask me some questions, that would probably be a good place to go from here.
Well, Dr. Carnevale, this is Rick Mayer, and I'm facilitating the room. I want to first thank you. Wait a minute, we got to be, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank you for making yourself available again and adjusting your day to be with us. You had some very profound and thought-provoking comments there. As Ken said, there's 90 or 100 of us in the room, so we're going to try to run microphones, and if necessary, I'll repeat the question for the doctor, but we've got it for a few more minutes. Anybody want to chime in and ask a question of Dr. Carnevale? Don't be shy. He came a long way to be with us today, and he learned Skype. Yes. Go ahead. Say your question out loud real quick, and I'll repeat it.
Okay, my question is, if our goal is then to increase the access takes those other jobs you talked about, like digging holes and that kind of thing, and how do we avoid becoming someplace like Israel comes to mind, where you just have all of these educated people and nobody
doing the work?
And there's not enough social services to support those people.
Okay, I'm going to do, Doctor, were you able to hear that question?
Yes, I was.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and try to help us understand the answer.
Well, one of the, there's a metaphor that floats around about this, and the metaphor is the hourglass economy. The notion being that we really are creating an awful lot of jobs at the post-secondary end of the continuum. That's where the wages are. And then there's a fairly thin sector of the economy, or a thinning sector, with the good manufacturing jobs, to use one of the usual, or natural resources, agriculture jobs and mining jobs, with the exception of coal, which is actually still growing.
Yeah.
So that, we're, and then, at the bottom of that little stem is a big, fat group of low-wage, low-skill jobs. And the labor force tends to divide pretty much along those lines, with more and more people and without post-secondary education or training. Really is one of the ways you can do this. When you do the numbers, it shows this pretty clearly. The people without post-secondary education or training falling into the bottom of the hourglass. And there are a couple, there's no way around the tragedy of this. It's real. The people who end up concentrated in the bottom of the hourglass, in the low-wage, low-skill jobs without much future, are people who come from low-income families and people, minorities, ethnics, and people who are generally, you can divide them pretty easily by education level. And that was not true 30, 40 years ago. In 1967, which is a particularly good year for data, which is why I use it, in 1967, 60% of Americans who were high school dropouts were in the middle class. They were in the, if you divide the American families into 10 cuts, that is deciles, these people were in the middle 6. They weren't in the top 3, and they weren't in the bottom 3. So in those days, you didn't even have to have a high school degree to be in the middle class, or at least to have a 60% chance of being in the middle class. That is exactly the number now, that is in 2006 or 7, I'm forgetting which year, is almost exactly the opposite. 60% of the people with 60 to 70% of high school dropouts are in the bottom 20% of the family income distribution. So the world has changed a lot, and it's largely driven in the end by access to education. And in the end, the value of a high school degree is not that great anymore. Where you get the real bump in value is when you start hitting post-secondary. It's not always it can be a certificate, a certification, industry-based certification. It can be a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. And one of the other interesting things that's changed is, while it's still true that if you have a BA, a bachelor's degree, you'll make more than somebody with an AA on average. And if somebody has an AA, they'll make more than somebody with a certificate on average. But once you get beneath the averages, what's really striking in the data is the diversity, so that now the overlap is very strong. So, for instance, somebody with a certificate in engineering, not an AA, just a certificate, will earn more than 25% of BAs.
Right.
Now, they won't earn as much as somebody with an AA in engineering, or as much as somebody with a BA in engineering. But the labor market is much more, there's a whole lot more fragmentation in it than it used to be. It's just not a matter of getting the next highest degree. Although on average, that's still the best strategy if you don't have another one.
Interesting. We have some other questions queued up. Yeah, right here. Go ahead.